Hello, this is Miss Clark Reads to you. We are on the 11th Tuesday. We talk about our culture in the memoir Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Hit him harder. I slapped Morrie's back. Harder. I slapped him again. Near his shoulders. Now down lower. Morrie, dressed in pajama bottoms, lay in bed on his side, his head flush against the pillow, his mouth open. The physical therapist was showing me how to bang loose the poison in his lungs, which he needed done regularly now to keep it from solidifying, to keep him breathing. So one of the things I want to do today when we're reading the 11th Tuesday is I really want us to pay attention to some of the punctuation. So notice the dash here. I'm going to read this two ways. I'm going to read it one way as if there was a comma there, and then I'll read it the way I would read it with the dash. And you're going to notice the difference, the subtle difference of the way Mitch is stressing the idea he's trying to get across. The physical therapist was showing me how to bang loose the poison in his lungs. If there was a comma there, in his lungs, which he needed done regularly now to keep it from solidifying, to keep him breathing. Now, watch, if I was an actor, how I would read this as an abrupt statement that the dash is showing. The physical therapist was showing me how to bang loose the poison in his lungs, which he needed done regularly now, to keep it from solidifying, to keep him breathing. So these are like a list, these commas, to keep him from solidifying, comma, to keep him breathing. But the stressor is the fact this is poison and the banging is done regularly. So not a comma, a dash. The dash is abrupt. Now watch the ellipsis. I, and then this is the pounding, always knew you wanted to hit me. Morrie gasped. So each ellipsis, ... signifies the hitting of the harder on Morrie's back to release the phlegm. Punctuation is important. I always tell my students, especially if you are reading out loud, you are pretending you're an actor and you are trying to get to the essence of what the writer is trying to express with that punctuation. What is the point of it? If you're an actor and this is a script. Yeah, I joked as I rapped my fist against the alabaster skin of his back. This is for that B you gave me sophomore year. Whack. We all laughed, a nervous laughter that comes when the devil is within earshot. It would have been cute, this little scene, were it not what we all knew it was, the final calisthenics before death. Morrie's disease was now dangerously close to his surrender spot, his lungs. He had been predicting he would die from choking, and I could not imagine a more terrible way to go. Sometimes he would close his eyes and try to draw the air up into his mouth and nostrils, and it seemed as if he were trying to lift an anchor. Fabulous simile. He would draw. I want you to visualize this for a moment. Okay, visualize it and try to put yourself in Morrie's spot, in his shoes, in his position. Okay, you have ALS. You're having your back whacked because you got to release phlegm. It's the only way you can clean those lungs out to breathe because there's an anchor. There's an anchor inside your lungs. His eyes would close to draw the air up like an anchor. It's heavy, it's hard, pulling up an anchor, pulling up steel, pulling up lead, lifting weights is hard. That's how hard it is for Morrie to breathe. That's what is the moment of the 11th Tuesday, the struggle. The ALS is taking Morrie down. So understand, in this moment, we don't have much time left with Morrie. And Mitch knows this. Outside, it was jacket weather, early October. The leaves clumped in piles on the lawns around West Newton. Morrie's physical therapist had come earlier in the day, and I usually excused myself when nurses or specialists had business with him. But as the weeks passed and our time ran down, I was increasingly less self conscious about the physical embarrassment. I wanted to be there. I wanted to observe everything. This was not like me, but then neither were a lot of things that had happened these last few months in Morrie's house. So the laughter in the background is my 12-year-old daughter. So we'll partly enjoy it because our last lesson was trying to be present. So we're reading, we're enjoying the words, and we're experiencing Morrie's struggle. We can also sort of enjoy the laughter that's going on behind us. I hope. So I watched the therapist work on Morrie in the bed, pounding the back of his ribs, asking if he could feel the congestion loosening within him. And when she took a break, she asked if I wanted to try it. And I said yes. Morrie, his face on the pillow, gave a little smile. Not too hard, he said. I am an old man. I drummed on his back and sides, moving around as she instructed. I hated the idea of Morrie's lying in bed under any circumstances. His last aphorism, when you're in bed, you're dead, rang in my ears. And curled on his side, he was so small, so withered. It was more a boy's body than a man's. I saw the paleness of his skin, the stray white hairs, the way his arms hung limp and helpless. I thought about how much time we spend trying to shape our bodies, lift weights, crunching sit ups, and in the end, nature takes it away from us anyhow. Beneath my fingers, I felt the loose flesh around Morrie's bones, and I thumped him hard as instructed. The truth is, I was pounding on his back when I wanted to be hitting the walls. Mitch, Morrie gasped, his voice jumpy as a jackhammer as I pounded on him. Uh-huh. When did I give you a B? Morrie believed in the inherent good of people, but he also saw what they could become. People are only mean when they're threatened, he said later that day. And that's what our culture does. That's what our economy does. Even people who have jobs in our economy are threatened because they worry about losing them. And when you get threatened, you start looking out only for yourself. You start making money a god. It is all part of this culture. He exhaled, which is why I don't buy into it. I nodded at him and squeezed his hand. We held hands regularly now. This was another change for me. Things that before would have made me embarrassed or squeamish were now routinely handled. The catheter bag connected to the tube inside him and filled with greenish waste fluid lay by my foot near the leg of his chair. A few months earlier, it might have disgusted me. It was inconsequential now. So was the smell of the room after Morrie had used the commode. He did not have the luxury of moving from place to place, of closing a bathroom door behind him, spraying some air freshener when he left. There was his bed, there was his chair, and that was his life. If my life were squeezed into such a thimble, I doubt I could make it smell any better. So, this is a metaphor. A thimble it looks like a cap. It's a little tiny steel cylinder that if you sew, you put your finger into so that when you put the needle in, your finger doesn't get pricked by the needle and bleed. And that a thimble is so tiny that you can just put your finger inside of it. So imagine the metaphor here that Morrie is comparing Mitch is comparing Morrie's life to a thimble, a bed, a chair, a bathroom, a study. That's it. And it's smelly and it's icky. But I'm not embarrassed about it. That's what Mitch says. You're seeing what you should be seeing here. If you've been following this, is the transformation, the shifting of Mitch's character. He's moving away from being selfish and self centered and focused on money to being open and understanding and helpful and focusing on that time with his best teacher he ever had. Here's what I mean about building your own little subculture, Morrie said. I don't mean you disregard every rule of your community. I don't go around naked, for example, and I don't run through red lights. The little things I can obey, but the big things, how we think, what we value, those you must choose yourself. You can't let anyone or any society determine those for you. Now, again, let's look at the dash, but the big things dash. But the big things, how we think, what we value, those you must choose yourself. So now let's read how that is a sentence without what's between the two dashes. But the big things, those you must choose yourself. And what are the big things between those dashes is a definition. How we think, what we value. You can't let anyone dash or any society determine those for you. Don't let society determine what you think. Don't let society determine who you love, how you feel. These are the big things, the things we value. You can pay attention to what society regards as far as the laws and the rules, but those heart matters. That's your culture. That's what you can have a right to choose. Or I don't know if Morrie would say the right. He would say the option to choose. Take my condition. The things I am supposed to be embarrassed about now, not being able to walk, not being able to wipe my ass, waking up some mornings wanting to cry. There is something innately embarrassing or shaming about them. It's the same for women not being thin enough or men not being rich enough. It's just what our culture would have you believe. Don't believe it. I asked Morrie why he hadn't moved somewhere else when he was younger. Where? I don't know. South America. New Guinea, someplace not as selfish as America. Oh, every society has its own problems, Morrie said, lifting his eyebrow, the closest he could come to a shrug. The way to do it, I think, isn't to run away. You have to work at creating your own culture. Look, no matter where you live, the biggest defect we human beings have is our short sightedness. Not being able to see beyond our present circumstances. That's what short sightedness is. We don't see, I lost my spot. We don't see what I keep getting messages. I'm so sorry. Through my email. We don't see what we could be. We should be looking at our potential, stretching ourselves into everything we can become. But if you're surrounded by people who say, I want mine now, you end up with a few people with everything and a military to keep the poor ones from rising up and stealing it. Morrie looked over my shoulder to the far window. Sometimes you could hear a passing truck or a whip of the wind. He gazed for a moment at his neighbors' houses and then continued. The problem, Mitch, is that we don't believe we are as much alike as we are. Whites and blacks, Catholics and Protestants, men and women. If we saw each other as more alike, we might be very eager to join in one big human family in this world and to care about the family the way we care about our own. If right now I'm having a complete connection, a text to world connection, that in these trying times, as we are nearing the end of quarantine, we are responsible to do our best, to wear our masks, to take care of one another, to be charitable and kind, because we are one human family. Text to world connection. What Morrie says that he wrote with Mitch in 1992 is applicable to today. But believe me, when you are dying, you see it's true. We all have the same beginning, birth, and we all have the same end, death. So how different can we be? Do you see how I read that with the dashes, how I stressed it? Just beautiful the way that Mitch chose to put the dashes there, because he wanted to show us the way Morrie said it. He stressed same beginning, birth, same beginning, birth, same ending, death. Invest in the human family. Invest in people. Build a little community of those you love and who love you. He squeezed my hand gently. I squeezed back harder. And like that carnival contest where you bang a hammer and watch the disc rise above the pole, I could almost see my body heat rise up Morrie's chest and neck into his cheeks and eyes. He smiled. In the beginning of life, when we are infants, we need each other to survive, right? And at the end of life, when you get like me, you need others to survive, right? His voice dropped to a whisper. But here's the secret. In between, we need others as well. Later that afternoon, Connie and I went into the bedroom to watch the O.J. Simpson verdict. It was a tense scene as the principals all turned to face the jury. Simpson, In his blue suit, surrounded by his small army of lawyers, the prosecutors who wanted him behind bars just a few feet away. And when the foreman read the verdict, not guilty, Connie shrieked, "Oh my God!" We watched as Simpson hugged his lawyers. We listened as the commentators tried to explain what it all meant. We saw crowds of blacks celebrating in the streets outside the courthouse, and crowds of whites sitting stunned inside restaurants. The decision was being hailed as momentous, even though murders take place every day. Connie went out in the hall. She had seen enough. I heard the door to Morrie's study close. I stared at the TV set. Everyone in the world is watching this thing, I told myself. Then from the other room, I heard the ruffling of Morrie's being lifted from his chair, and I smiled as the trial of the century reached its dramatic conclusion. My old professor was sitting on the toilet. It is 1979. A basketball game in the Brandeis gym. Okay, so now we're going into a flashback, folks. So we're going to see Morrie's personality as a teacher in 1979 at a basketball game in the gym at Brandeis University. The team is doing well, and the student section begins a chant. We're number one. We're number one. Morrie is sitting nearby. He is puzzled by the cheer. At one point, in the midst of "We're number one," he rises and yells, "What's wrong with being number two?" The students look at him. They stop chanting. He sits down, smiling triumphantly. So now here's where you'll stop and make a book, brain, heart, and connection. Book, brain, heart connection. I will make one also. So stop and then come back and I'll share mine with you. Okay, welcome back. So, most unique teacher. This is a heart connection. He challenges the thinking of his students. He did in 1979. What's wrong with being second? What's wrong with it? Answer the question. What is wrong with being second? I'm not an athlete. What's wrong with being second? Is it that bad? Does it sting that much? When the two teams go to the Super Bowl? Does it hurt that bad that you didn't win? And why? You made it to the Super Bowl. And then still challenging students and people. Many years later, 79, 89, 12, 13 years later, still challenging the belief system of the culture. Makes me wonder, how many people can do what Morrie did? How many teachers can be that good? I'm interested to hear how you connected with the 11th Tuesday, and we will pick up on the audiovisual part 3. Thanks for letting me read to you, and I hope you have a really nice day. See you soon.